Hi, I'm Diana.
Hi, I'm Ria, and today we're going to tell you how we created our chess pieces using 3D printing.
We started off our project with practicing how to draw and print two rings each. We used two techniques for this process, which are extrusion and revolution. We both built our circular shaped rings with a revolve tool since extrusion was limiting in a sense that it was much harder to create circular and rounded surfaces.
The second step of our design process was sketching out the individual chess pieces. We drew them out by hand and determined appropriate dimensions for different parts of each chess piece. We decided that it would be hard to draw sketches of the intended dimensions since the Fusion 360 window was relatively small, so we later scaled the sizes before we printed.
For the pawn, I started off with setting the axis of rotation as the y-axis. From there I sketched one side of the piece since the pawn is symmetrical and therefore could be revolved. I first drew out the head of the pawn by using the 3-point arc tool. Then I drew out the body by using the fit point spline tool, which allows for curved edges. I made sure to use just a line to create the base so the bottom of the pawn would be a flat surface. After creating the sketch, I used the revolve tool to revolve the sketch around the y-axis to produce a model.
Other symmetrical processes, such as the bishop and queen, were also sketched using an identical process. The process for sketching the body of the king was slightly different. The cross at the top of the body could not be created using the revolve tool, so we had to sketch out the full shape of the cross and then use the extrude tool. Another piece that involved a slightly different process was the rook. For the ridges on top of the rook, a circular pattern was created on top of the revolved sketch using the line function. Then sections were selected and extruded to produce ridge-like structures protruding from the top.
The process used to sketch the knight also varied slightly from the other pieces. The bottom half of the sketch was revolved around the axis to create a circular base, while the top half was extruded using the extrude tool. Once all the pieces had been designed, they were scaled appropriately and printed out using the 3D printer. So to reflect on our design process, we're going to talk about some challenges we faced. One challenge we faced was the fact that both of us had no prior knowledge of how to use Fusion 360, so it took a lot of time for us to figure out how to use certain tools.
Another challenge was when printing, the printing would often abort due to clogging or problems with the machine, and this was out of our control, so we had to print multiple times.
And some of the chess pieces weren't symmetrical, so we had to use different tools to figure out how to model them in a certain way.
Another thing to reflect upon is if we repeated this process, what steps would we do differently? I think one of the steps that we would do differently is now that we know how to use the software, we can add more detail to the structures. Let's say
Like the face of the knight or the chip surface on the bishop.
And what were some defects in the structures that we printed? I think one of the main defects was the fact that the bases were not even for some of them, despite the fact that we printed them on the printer bed, probably because we printed too many structures at one time. So avoid that next time.
Yeah. But overall, we had a lot of fun. We learned a lot. So yeah.
Yay.